They said they're waiting for me.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another beautiful Monday with us on Live with Lloyd, where the joy of numerology is the joy of learning and enlightenment on this March the 14th of the year 2022. And let me tell you, I didn't know I'd done a total of over 70 episodes so far. This one, I think, moving forward is going to be considered one of my best, but everybody that comes on is always my best. But anyway, this distinguished gentleman, I think all of your lives will change in a way that you probably can't imagine. And we will have him on in just a moment. But as you know, I always like to give the cosmic forecast for today. And by the way, when I have my guests on, please, for those of you who would like to chime in with questions or responses, please feel free. But today, as you see, please like, share, and subscribe. I always got to get that out the way because if I don't put that in there, I will forget to mention it. Like if you really like it, share if you really think it's valuable, and subscribe if you want to kind of keep up with what's going on because I do this religiously, consistently every Monday, every Wednesday at 7 p.m. on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and um, YouTube. Of course, YouTube. So today is Monday. It's the 14th. The sun is in Pisces. The moon is in Leo. It's a 9 universal month. It's an 11 universal week. It's a 5 universal day. And if those of you who are viewing in are Geminis and Virgos, well, guess what? You too go to the head of the class this particular day. And this also includes those born on the 5th, the 14th, or the 23rd of any month. This is your time. I got to tell you this. Is very interesting. Hold on one second. Here we go. All right. All right, everybody. Hi. Thank you for joining us this evening. I have a pleasure. Thanks to Sister Kafunya, by the way. And also, I want to thank Mercedes to let me know, excuse me, we're holding on. I got you, Mercedes. Thank you. As a reminder, too, because I was running behind just a little bit. I was so busy engaged with my guest that's coming on in a minute. But you're about to meet an extraordinary human being. All of you are extraordinary. Don't get me wrong. But this is a gentleman that has had near death experiences. He remembers drowning and some other things. So we're gonna ask him what is it like to do that. But better yet, let's bring Eugene on. Eugene, how are you, sir?
Good, Lloyd. How you doing?
Fine, thank you. You
Okay.
have
Thanks
an
for having.
interest. Huh? Oh, listen, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Listen, it's a very, very interesting story. You had a couple. There's so many things. I know we're gonna go over the hour. I'm gonna tell you straight up front because of so many things that needs to be resolved. You are a near-death experiencer, which I thought was interesting that term because the word they like to project now is influencers. Okay, but you are an experiencer. That means anybody who experienced things. So, for example, I thought as a youngster, I had a near death experience. When I read your book and talked to you, man, mine is just a walk in the park. It ain't even nowhere close. But, it all depends on what it is. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before I get into questions, please?
Yeah. I'm from Philadelphia. Um, I have a son. I'm a single father. Our family. Now, my father. I was adopted at birth.
Mm
and I was adopted by two actually perfect black parents.
Mm-hmm.
Dad was a principal in Philadelphia schools in the inner city. In fact, like I told you yesterday, he was friends with the real life school teacher from Lean on Me, the movie with Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, yeah. The
So
Hold on, your dad mentored him? Is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
he would call the house, and his name was kind of familiar whenever we had phone calls. Dad was a older principal in Philly, and Mr. Carter was maybe about 5 or 10 years younger. So he
Mm-hmm.
advised him on a lot of stuff, and he was in the same way, just as strict as that principal in that movie.
Because I was going to say in the movie, it was interesting that Morgan Freeman, who projected that character, was a man that obviously didn't play. So
No,
that's probably where he got that from your dad. That's what you're saying.
yep, yep. In fact,
That makes
his
sense.
dad used some of the same lines that he did in the movie on me, as the years went by. But he was a good dad,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a real good mom. And things were different back then. Um, but so at age 11, we moved to Kent, Ohio, where the Kent State shootings happened. And so that was like
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
small town life, the opposite of what we had here in Philly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we got to know the outdoors. We swam, did sports, and it was actually kind of a nice place to grow up. Because who knows what we would have gotten into in the city, 11,
Sure.
12. They already had gangs and stuff.
Sure.
So
Sure.
at the age of 6, I began having uh, psychic experience, mainly out of body experiences. They started as dreams and out of bodies. And now at age 9, I had asked God for them. I asked him, if you show me all the invisible things, because I was aware that there was an invisible world. If you show me all the
Mm-hmm.
invisible things in this world, then I'll always tell people about you. And
Interesting.
2 years, sorry, Lloyd. About 2 years later, at age 11, they started in earnest. And they started off as dreams and out of bodies. And it'd be a mixture where I'd have a dream and then an out of body, then another dream and an out of body. So I began to distinguish between an out of body and a dream. And they both have different levels of consciousness, like levels of how aware or awake the person is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, So at age 9 in Philly, I asked him to show me all those things. 2 years later, at age 11, it started in earnest. And I had forgotten about my promise, but he hadn't. And
Mm-hmm. Right.
so they came on even stronger from age 6 to 16. And it culminated or ended, not ended, but the near death at age 14 was like a graduation of all these experiences. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then at age 18 or 19, I had a UFO abduction. I was with a friend too. So it's been like a psychic, mystical. It started off as psychic, then ended up as a mystical life. And the mystic is different from the psychic, whereas the psychic has abilities that he is not fully in control of and is unaware of, uh, is unable to use. He doesn't know what the kind of abilities he has, and
Mm-hmm.
it can a lot of times cannot control them, but he does have them.
Mm-hmm.
But the mystic is also, the psychic could be an atheist. The mystic is primarily concerned with God, and those psychic gifts that come from uh, living a life dedicated to striving to God. Those are the after effects or gifts that come from like studying that spirit in that spirit world. And
Mm-hmm.
the person should actually like ignore those psychic abilities because they will come. We're all psychic, but when you start walking on that path of higher knowledge, then those powers come in stronger, and they also last a lifetime and get stronger every year. It's a wonderful thing to study and experience, and the blacks, we have our place in that too. Uh, because all of this stuff really goes back to our ancient history, our ancient science.
Hmm.
It's just been stolen, borrowed, or copied and made to look like it was really just reinvented. But all that kind of knowledge we know well, and
Now
so that
I want to move you back a second because you in the book you said you had actually drowned in the waters in Ohio. Can you tell us about that when you were 15?
yeah.
Well, how did
Um,
that happen? What were you doing?
I used to. They had a good sports, teams and facilities out there, and so I swam one season. I also ran track. I played all the sports,
Hmm.
and so we were at a church youth group, and I jumped into this lake uh, with my feet pointed down, coming straight down. Uh, because of an ear infection, I would only dive in the water at a race or something like that.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
when I had to, but if I didn't have to, I would jump in feet first. So I jumped in feet first, and I jumped up high like a basketball player and came straight down and got stuck in the muck underneath the dock. Just like you see those country time commercials where the kid is running and he jumps off. It was like that.
Yeah, yeah.
I got stuck up into the knee, and I could not let loose. I was really strong, and a weightlifter, and I could not break loose. Um, it's a pretty long story. Do you want me to go into it now, or
Yeah, yeah, please. Because there may be those who are listening that may have had near death experiences, but the fact that you knew you drowned, how did you come out of it? What was your experiences? What were your feelings? You know how, like in your book, you describe it like some says, "Well, I saw a light, I saw
yeah.
this or that." Yours appears to be different. Can you share that with people, please?
Yes, look. So yeah, I jumped in feet first. I was in 10th grade. Um, got stuck in the muck up to the knee. I now I choked in what seemed like gallons of water all at once when I couldn't hold my breath any longer. I was
Sure.
holding I was holding my breath as I tried to jerk loose, and then finally, when I had to uh, let my air out, I sucked in all this water. I became filled up with the water, just like you see in the movies. And the clown is kind of standing there, but he's full up of water.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's like that. And then I fell and bent over, and I fell on the bed of the pond, the lake, on the bottom, and the muck came up when I fell and covered me like a cold death blanket. And at this time, I was paralyzed. I couldn't move, but I could see and I could also hear. I could hear them splashing up there, but I couldn't move. I could see them from my peripheral on the side, swimming and playing up there. It's about maybe the size of a basketball hoop,
Hmm.
that height.
Hmm.
Sucked in all the water, fell down on my side. Heart was still beating. I could still see, but the paralyzation was setting in. Um, um, Now, at this point, the levels of consciousness, like how aware I was, began to slow down from like a normal awake time like we have now
Hmm.
into like a dream consciousness where the time slows down. And the time and the person's level of consciousness is something we'll talk about later on too.
Please.
But whenever your level of consciousness changes, like in a dream or in a psychic or mystic state, then the time also changes. And usually it's slower because that's a different world that we enter when that inner part of us comes out. And so I lay down on the thing and I watched while I was waiting for someone to come down and rescue me. No one did. I could hear the heart beating, and it started to slowly get slower and slower and slower. Like it went from instead of going every other second to a beat, it went every 5 seconds, and then every
Mm.
10. So I knew. I could also like feel the organs in my body shutting down like little candles one by one, and I knew that's the liver. Those are the kidneys. I could feel it, and I knew what was happening. So I realized I was slowly dying. If someone didn't come and get me soon, that it would be it. Um, no one came. The paralyzations went up Completely now. I was completely paralyzed. I couldn't even move my eyes. I could only see straight ahead, but I could still hear and see. I could feel the heartbeat, and which was getting slower and slower. It was going to go out.
Mm-hmm.
At a certain point, Lloyd, it did go out. And when it went out, when the heart stopped, and the heart's an electromagnetic motor, when it stopped, everything else shut off. The eyes and the hearing stopped too. And I heard a loud boom, and then I had flatlined dead. And some other black athletes from our school had accidentally drowned in that lake too.
Hmm.
So I flatlined at the bottom of that lake. There were some interesting things too, like as I slowly died, I could feel the pain, like I was shivering because those lakes are cold anyway, even in the summer, especially down at the bottom where it's dark.
Mm-hmm.
And when I touched down, the muck came up and covered me like a blanket, and I was super freezing. And I don't like the cold. And just when I couldn't take it anymore, all the pain suddenly cut off. And I could like breathe again, and was at peace. And I was covered in like an envelope of calm assurance that everything would be all right. Even though you're dying, that cutting off of all the pain let me know that I was going to be all right. And when that pain ceased, I wasn't afraid anymore of dying. I didn't even try to fight it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a point of surrender in that where you realize that you can't get out, and you just let the will of God do its will.
Mm-hmm.
So I noticed all that stuff, and then I flatlined, and the hearing in the eyes went out just when the heart stopped, black. And then there was silence. Approximately 15 to 23 seconds later, I popped awake. And I popped awake in like a gyroscope type of sphere, like a life-giving sphere that was moving. And as my invisible spirit body began to materialize, that sphere, and same kind of sphere like in Leonardo da Vinci's Diluvian Man,
Mm-hmm.
same kind of sphere, the sphere dematerialized as I materialized into a solid but invisible out-of-body form. So, and I woke up and I knew that I was somewhere because I was thinking. Like I was saying, I think, therefore I am. I knew that I was awake in some kind of time and space because I was used to the out of body. So I realized that I was myself somewhere in time and space. And it wasn't, and I looked around, everything was green. That was the water that I saw in my spirit body.
Mm-hmm.
The spirit body, whenever the person has an out of body, and the out of body is like the little sister of the near death, and near death is the little brother of the permanent death. So those are all out of bodies, regular out of body, then the near death out of body where you automatically, and it's an involuntary thing that will naturally happen. You'll flatline, and it takes the spirit body approximately 15 to 22 seconds to come out of the body slowly. And then you regain consciousness about 8 feet above your body. So when I realized that I was still alive, well, I realized that I was awake and I didn't know where I was. And all I saw was green. And then I looked down and saw my dead body, and I remembered that I had just drowned. And
Really?
I looked at it like it was a mannequin without any feeling or emotion. And in that world, the emotions and feelings are different, where it's more nonverbal and symbolic. Like you might see like a blue sphere floating in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
or it's also a world that's full of illusions and spiritual reality. Um, so I see my dead body, and I call that the realization of space and time because I realized that I was still alive, although I saw my dead body down there. So I realized that I was somewhere in space and time. I saw my dead body. That reminded me of what had just happened, and I was actually fully glad that you're alive because you see yourself down there, but it doesn't really, you don't get sad or anything. You just notice it because
Mm-hmm.
you are that person in out of body form, and you see it as like a coat, and it doesn't even look like you. It just looks like a mannequin with something clothes on it.
Hmm.
because there's no animation, there's no life force in it. But I was awake and alive, and I realized that after I saw my dead body. Now, right after I realized that I had just died and regained consciousness after death, I I didn't go, but I suddenly appeared in this what they call a life review room. It's like a circular band, a big circular band like they have in the carnivals that you get on, and
Hmm.
you stand up and it spins around, and you. It was like that, but I was
Hmm.
floating in the middle of it. And in the life review room, that's where everything you ever did, said, or thought is replayed back to you in your mind. And a lot of times it's seen like this, where you can see through it. It's seen in multi-dimensional images.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
everything you thought, said, or did, even the secret things that you thought when you were alone in the bathroom. Um, I remember at one time at a summer camp, I threw a rock at this kid. He threw one back at me, but even that was shown. Um, and there was no real judgment, but I was asked, have you, what have you done for others? There were three things that I was asked during this life review, and I was floating in the middle of the of this circle,
Hmm.
and the inner bands of the circle were going to the right, while the outer bands are going to the left. And in ufology, that kind of represents a UFO. Their propulsion system.
Ufology means the study of the UFO, which is where that word comes from, ufology.
Yeah,
Okay, gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's important too. But I noticed that one band was going one way and the other was going the other way, and UFOs use that for a propulsion thing. But there was still a lot more to happen. So they asked me, "What have you done for others? What have you done for yourself?" Now, what have you done for others? What have you done for yourself? And then the most important one: have you always believed in me? And he knew the answer, but when I said yes, um, it was I was allowed into heaven, and it was first time. It was time to proceed on with the steps to getting up to heaven. And you hear people talk about in the near death the white lights or different colored lights, red, yellow, blue, all colors. And this is when I went into the lights. Um, Now, like I said, levitation in those worlds is normal. Just like in a dream, we might have a flying dream or where we're in the air floating, and
Hmm.
in the out of body levitation. So in the spiritual realms, levitation is normal. So after the life review, also Lloyd, um, when I was being asked those questions, there was a what we would call a spiritual lawyer, uh, a Jesus, Mohammed, Buddha figure, exhorting God in my behalf, or exhorting the questioner in my behalf of the good things I have done, um, and the good person that I was. And
Hmm.
so this was definitely a super powerful authority figure communicating with the fatherhead on my behalf. And I was
Interesting.
glad.
Question.
Uh,
How did they find out? How did someone or whatever discover that you were at the bottom of this lake in Ohio?
that I had what? Oh,
Who
no one,
discovered? Yeah, I mean, nobody looked for you. Nobody says, "Where's Eugene?" Or
no, no one ever did. And at the end, because there's more to it, at the end, I was thrust up out of the muck, like just like when you have a fish on a boat, and he jumps out of the bucket into the bottom of the boat, and
hmm.
he's squirming around. But when you put him back in the water, he wakes back up. It was like that, and something reanimated my life force, pushed me up out of that muck, and I swam to the top and choked out a lot of that pond lake water. And then, still in shock, all I could remember doing was going to the side of the beach and just scraping the muck off my leg. And then I repressed it fully, because I was only 14.
Hmm.
Um, but now, after the life review and the uh, father son figure exhorting in my behalf, I appeared again. And whenever you have a dream or an out of body and you're in one place and you suddenly just find yourself in another place, that's a lapse of consciousness, which means that something may have occurred between where you were and where you got to. And so always watch for that when you're doing one thing and then suddenly you find yourself somewhere else. That's a lapse of consciousness. And there's ways where you can extend your consciousness, the continuity of consciousness, so that you can remember every sequential event in order. There are no breaks, like in a dream or an out of body. Sometimes you'll have a dream, you won't remember everything. And a lot of times those are the most important things. But with the meditational breathings, and hopefully we can talk about that later, that can extend the person to the level of consciousness where they're more awake in these dreams, out of bodies, and other encounters. Because it wakes you up in the inner world and in the outer world too. But so even more important than the life review, Lloyd, I found myself on a beach-like setting. And I looked out at the horizon and I saw what looked like the sun rising in the morning. And it was the only thing I could see and the only thing I looked at. And as it rose in the air, I rose in unison with it. And when it got to about the 10 o'clock angle, it changed without seeing it changed. It changed imperceptibly into a red color. And the color, it went from orange, sun color, to red. And the colors, both orange and red, had physio-spiritual effects on me. Where the orange, where one was of a cleaning nature and the other was like a restorative nature. Mm-hmm. So I was literally being cleansed and purged to go to that final stage where it's the heavenly realm. So it's like a showering. These rays cleaned me spiritually and physically. This is where, and that's probably where a lot of people get healed from certain things during their near deaths. Mm-hmm. So those rays had a powerful effect on me physically and on me spiritually, where they cleansed my spirit and cleansed my body, giving me like a spiritual shower before I met the King of Kings, or the God who is God of all. Mm-hmm. And I had always believed in God, but I, just like Moses in the Ten Commandments, I wanted to see that he really was he. And I asked him to show me that you are God when I was young. And so this was my chance. I didn't think I would have to die.
I have a couple of questions, which is, first of all, with that near-death experience at 14, actually drowning, seeing, and then out-of-body experience, did you share that with some adults or friends? And did they think you were like, oh, Eugene, you're just making this up? You know how people do. Did you go through that?
Well, this was 75. So, like back then, and we're probably close to the same age. Mm-hmm. Back then, you had to be really careful about talking about like paranormal stuff, because they had like crazy houses and stuff back then. If you said something that was too out of line, they would take you to a crazy house. Mm-hmm. So people didn't really talk about that. And then no one had really even heard that term, because the near-death study didn't start until 78, and that was 75. So I knew that something really strong had happened to me, that somehow I escaped death. But I told a fellow track star, I told him. And in fact, having that experience affected my neurology, because while running track, my arm would spasm and jerk the first year after that near death. It went away a year later. Mm-hmm. But I didn't realize later that that was from the near death. But then, so the red lights and orange lights, the orange lights purified, the red lights even more purified me, purged me, getting me ready for that meeting. Then I went up into the white lights and I floated up. And in between the red light and the white light, I had a 7-second conscious glimpse, like of where I was. I could see the beach down below, because I was floating in the air. And I was floating while being pulled, magnetized up into the air, because I was heading into a direction that was not my volition. I didn't mean to do it. I was just pulled up. Just like when I saw the first sun, I rose in unison with it. That was involuntary. Something else was controlling me, a force that I couldn't control. So I went with it. went
Hmm.
through the red and orange, then into the white lights. But right before I got to the white lights, I looked down. I could see the beach and stuff. I could see birds flying. I could feel the wind. So I was partially physical for about 7 seconds, and then I returned to spirit body form. And during the ascension, the spirit body changed, especially according to the colors of that sun.
Hmm.
Um, it went from a invisibly solid, invisible body when the sun was orange to a partially solid, semi-invisible when the sun was red. And then when I went into ascended up into the white lights, it became completely invisible, but still in solid body form. Um, uh, in the invisible realms, especially outside of the dreams, and in dreams too, you might see a lot of circles, just like our planet, like you were saying on one of your shows. Our solar system is full of planets that have circular, uh, uh, shapes,
Hmm.
and a lot of times those shapes are spheres of consciousness. Like it's not just a thing; it's a living thing that you can interface and interact with. Just like I was interacting with that red light and orange light as I rose up with it, and it showered me. So I'm going up, ascending upward, and like I was being magnetically pulled, and also trying to go up there myself. So it was a dual thing where I wanted to go there. Um, Now the scientists say that only 1 in 10 make it to the white lights, and only 1 in 4 remember those experiences. Um,
Really? Okay.
and because of those early out of bodies and dreams, I was really used to the inner levels of consciousness and being more awake in those levels of consciousness. And that was because of the daily and nightly meditational breathings that I was doing, really for sports, because it helped me in sports, but it also opened up the psychic barnyard doors, where all those things could come in, the breathings, the extra air. And I was more awake in the dreams. I was more psychic in real life, and the nightly experiences were still continuing. And now, had I known that the breathings were making those things happen, I would have stopped, but I didn't. I was using the breathings for sports.
Let me ask you
Uh,
this. You explained in the book that eventually you reached out to people with what they call NDA, which is near death experience. Is that correct?
yes.
And who was one of the first persons you reached out to? Because you explained in
Uh,
the book. And what made
yeah.
you go to them in the first place?
Say it again.
What made you go to these series of doctors
Yeah.
who are supposed to be specialists in the near death experience realm?
Yeah. Um, so I was at mom's, and she had a magazine on the table while she was cooking us some food or something. And I picked it up because I was in my 20s and 30s. I was developing the psychic powers, practicing them and experimenting with them and reading and studying, doing the breathings, keeping in good shape. So I was in my mid 30s. I was 39 actually. And she had this magazine. There was a near death researcher on the front. I said, near death, because I had been reading books about that and seeing the shows on TV. And when I saw these shows where people were saying they saw Elvis and stuff, I was like, I have one of those, but I didn't see Elvis and stuff like that. Mine was different. So I saw this and I read the article, and he seemed like he sincerely believed in it and wanted to learn more. And he asked anyone who was interested in it or had any other psychic experience to contact him. So me and a couple of friends, Spanish and Black, girls and guys, um, I told them, and they had psychic stuff happening too. Because the ethnics, we have that naturally. We're especially us blacks, we're naturally intuitive, heavily, and we'll talk about that too. But so I told them, let's write to this guy, this scientist, and tell him what's happening with us. I had had a lot of stuff, and they had stuff too, and no one wrote. I was the only one who wrote. And then I forgot about it. And 2 months later, he wrote back and asked if I could. Invited me to join him in his research, and I said yeah. And what I did when I wrote the letter, I told him everything that had ever happened to me psychically. And I went from the present day backwards. and and it turned out to be way more than I had remembered or thought. And all kinds of things like dreams, the out of body, hearing inner voices, seeing things in your mind while you're awake, uh, spontaneous out of bodies. The cross country runners have this where they're running and they suddenly pop out of their body about 20 feet above their head and they see themselves running. Then they pop back in within maybe a second or two.
Mm-hmm.
I had those. I had future dreams that would come true. Um, a deja vu. So I told him about all that stuff, the UFOs. And I thought, maybe he would pick the out of bodies or the remote viewing where you can see
Now,
far.
this is Dr. Bruce Grayson that you're talking about, right?
Yes, this was Grayson. He's kind of like the Baron Frankenstein of the near-death research.
Okay, hold on. Let's show a picture so people can see. This is because actually you have a response in your book of what he wrote to you,
Yes,
and he was considered the one of the top near-death experienced doctors in terms of research.
definitely, yes. That's what surprised me, that he'd be open enough to, because science back then, they weren't, the life after death was like a dream to them, just like kind of like the UFO field is now.
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm,
but he was one of the pioneers back in the 80s who started up, late 70s.
mm-hmm.
And he officially took over, because you hear about the others, Raymond Moody and them, but really him, Atwater, and Kenneth Ring were the three main ones who did it. And Grayson was the white lab coat doctor, the prototype. He was a psychiatrist. So I said, this would be a good one. And I thought when I wrote to him, I just wanted to hear a response. I thought he was a normal psychology professor. And when I looked him up online, he turned out to be the number one. So I said, let me tell him everything that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of telling him just what happened, let me tell him every detail, because I remembered a lot. And now, and I worked with him for 2 years, and as I sent him stuff, after the first year, I noticed that he stopped corresponding. And Atwater, at that time, had warned people in her books that when you give your research to these doctors, make sure you have it copyrighted first, because they will steal it. And I had been making independent films at that time, and they do that in that business. And I said, well, definitely they'll do it in research. And so I sent him some reverse information. I sent him one piece of information that was true, the length of time between death and reconsciousness after death,
Mm-hmm.
and the other was false. And he had the false information that he thought was true up on his website the next day. And I said, this guy is not. He's just taking what I have. So I switched from him and went to the Female World Authority, who was working. They all three worked together, but she had 3 near deaths. So I said, she's the one who warned me about this kind of stuff. Let me switch to her, because she actually died and has a better feeling of what I went through. That
And
was
this is
PMA.
Dr. Patricia Atwater.
Yes.
And you said she wound up in the book being your mentor.
Yeah, she became my mentor. I contacted her, and and sometimes you have to reach out to people if you want to get things happening in life. You got to reach out, make contacts, introduce yourself, and stuff like that. So I reached out to her after seeing how his character was. I said, he's not going to steal anything from me, because I knew I had some good stuff.
Well, what would they want to steal from you? This is what I don't understand for those who are supposed to be doing research.
The research data, the changes in the physiology of the invisible spirit body, in each stage of the near death, the length of time between death and reconsciousness after death. They didn't have any of that stuff, or didn't even really think of that stuff. In fact, back then, all they knew was that they knew 5 things that a person who has a near death comes close to death. They may feel a movement going out of their body. They may see loved ones. They may sense a presence of God. Those were about it. And so they kept rotating those things around, because a lot of that stuff is grants. and they get another 5-year grant to study it, and a lot of not good. And
I got it. I got it. So
Mhm.
a lot of this was based upon their research, so they could continue to get funding.
Continue to get funding.
Because one
And
of
so,
the ones you, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
um, and so they weren't in any deep hurry to really solve anything, especially if the grant money keeps them, funded, and how they probably got a good amount.
Yeah,
But
why should they begin to do it? Because there was another doctor you met here too, Dr. David Jacobs, that you spoke about in your book. Who is he? He was from the University of whatever,
he's from Temple University.
Temple University. So,
Yeah.
how did you get involved with him?
Well, I worked at Temple University from '86 to 2006, and his office was right next door to our police headquarters. I worked at the Temple Police,
Hmm.
and in the '90s, when I started checking out UFOs, because I had seen another one in the '90s, I said, "Let me contact him,"
Hmm.
because I had seen some things, Lloyd, in my near death that seemed to have UFO properties in it too. I said, well, let me check with this guy's the number one in the world. He happens to work right next door on the same campus where I work.
You
So it
mean
seemed
at
like,
this time, this gentleman, Dr. David Jacobs, was considered the number one authority at that time?
yes, the '90s was his super heyday. He was one of the biggest, well, probably the biggest one in the '90s.
When it came to near-death experience research?
Say it again.
When it came to near-death experience research?
No, he was with the UFO alien abductions.
Ah, okay,
Yes.
okay, okay. So we're going to talk about that too. That's interesting. What about this doctor you also was involved with, Dr. Charles T. Hart?
Yeah, Dr. Tart. So now he was uh, the world authority in levels of consciousness and out of body experiences. And so on an email. Now my research was kind of known to the near-death scientists and some of the other scientists in other fields because I made sure it was. Um, so I said, let me write this guy and see if he has heard of me, just to see, since he was the number one. And I knew that what I knew about the levels of consciousness was close to his or just as good. And I called myself Kevin. I asked him, have you heard of this mystic who's already solved the near-death riddle? And he said, I have also heard of this American mystic who at the age of 14 was the nation's foremost authority in levels of consciousness and experiential dream control. And so he admitted in an email that I, as a 14-year-old, had eclipsed him in his research
Really?
because I really had. Yeah. And at one point, he made a statement: "We really don't even know what consciousness is." And so, mhm, yeah, that was him. So I wanted to see if he had heard of me, and at first he said no, but I'll send you a copy of the email. And then he said, "I have also," because he didn't want to make it seem like he didn't know what was happening. He said, "I
Hmm.
have also heard of this American mystic, and at the age of 14, best in the world." And so I thought that was he admitted that I knew more than him as a 14-year-old than he did. And he wasn't anyone that I dealt with besides that. But I had studied his work too in the '90s and '80s. Um, but with Dr. Jacobs, I saw what looked like a UFO inclinations or patterns in my near death. And now Grayson didn't understand my near death because they were still on this, seeing bright lights and seeing loved ones. And I was describing the death process. And the book describes it to the T. If we had more time, I'd do it here. They didn't know if the near death had a certain order, and they admitted this. We don't know if it has a certain order, or if. And so I was able to remember every order in sequential stages, what happens time after time after time. I mean, stage after stage.
Hmm.
And that's why he got me into his research. He felt with the out of bodies I had in the dreams that I'd be able better to remember more of the spiritual out of body, which is a near death. And I remembered it well. And so PMH was more on my level. And
Now, in the book, you explained that prior to that, with Grayson, Jacobs, Hart, etc., that it was an all boys club until Patricia Atwater came along. Can you explain her role? Because I understand from your book, she changed the whole equation of how these men in this so-called experimental near-death research field was doing. Can you explain a little bit about the impact that she made and how she mentored you?
Yes, Lloyd. Yeah, PMH, she had 3 near deaths in the late 70s, and she began studying it on her own, just like I did. So in the early 80s, when near death officially took off, it started in 78, and people started hearing about, but the official research began in about 83, 82.
Mm-hmm.
And she was an independent researcher who wanted to break in to the near death research clique. And it's a clique, a small clique. And they were reluctant to do that because she was a female first. But her information, because she had actually died and come back to life, they hadn't. Her information was so advanced and revolutionary that after time they had to let her in
They had
because
no
she was better.
choice.
She was better than them. And so she started publishing her own stuff and then was admitted in. She had to become a doctor. They made her become a doctor. But they bristled at the fact of a woman being in. And she also helped to make sure I had an even shot of getting in too.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of times they don't study the ethnic or minority population. It's mainly like 94% white. And in fact, she apologized in one of her books for that way being that way, because it's the ethnics and the whites. Researchers know we know way more naturally than them about these realms, and a lot of the stuff that they profess and talk about, they've just gotten from us, re you know repackaged and made it
Mm-hmm.
look like it came out with their own. But all that stuff is stuff that the blacks and other groups have studied and mastered, and they know that. Um, so PMH had more than they had, and so they knew that we have to let her in, or else she eclipses us. And so I wrote her after Grayson tried to steal my stuff. I wrote her, and I said to her, if the two of us, if if the two of our if our minds should meet, then it will be your will, and if not, then it will be God's will. So I was saying, I have some good stuff here. If you want to meet, then we can. If not, then that's the way that God meant it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
um, so yes, she did engage me, and we became friends, and she became my mentor. Where I was able, because I had already studied her books, I was able to pump her for other additional info that could help put my puzzle together during the last 20 years, and we're still in friends and still in good contact now.
Even to this day.
Yes, yeah, she has a black husband, and she was kind of like the Midwest kind, like the opposite of that. Like if you
Mm-hmm.
see a picture of her before she had her near death, she was like some prim homestead woman. But after her near death, she came out, and she's been with the guy for like 30 years or so. But she's been really good. And she remembered what she had went through with these guys, and she said he has good stuff and deserves to be in this too. So she helped to push me in and to pull me in. And in life, sometimes success is half deserving it and half pushing your way in, because there's people who don't want people to succeed. But she's seen it's
That I
simply good.
know. That I
Yeah,
know. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. I don't know
And
where that
even
mindset
if you,
comes from, but
yeah,
it's very interesting. Was she in part the one that encouraged you to publish your book?
yes, she, along with dad and son, said that you should write the book. And the UFO doctor, Dr. J, said too. Because I had a lot of good stuff, but I was holding it. I was also doing films at that time too, and being a single dad and working with the police. So I was really just nonstop. And
Mm-hmm.
I was 39. I said, now's the time. If I want to make my mark into this world, now's the time to do it while I'm still young, in my 30s, with
Mm-hmm.
the energy. So I did, and there was a lot of nights where I stayed up all night and then had to work the next day, and that lasted from like '97 doing that till about 2014.
Hmm.
And so I decided to. The research was really good. I decided to write it and to write the book. And so in '08, right when Obama came out, that's when Dad said, "Yeah, do write this." And she said to write it too. She said, "Eugene, no one will ever take you seriously unless you get it down in book form." Because I was kind of keeping it privately to myself
Sure.
and yeah, Dr. J and then Dr. Grayson. So I said, yeah. And I knew I had some good stuff because none of them were talking about levels of consciousness or changing the spirit body, the white lights, the origins and effects of those lights, and the mixing and merging with God, let alone out of bodies and dreams. So, and also I wanted to have a black in that psychic research thing representing the blacks too. Because
Mm-hmm.
we know some stuff too, and they know we're smart. It's just that we don't know how smart we are. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because I know
it's
you said when you lectured before a white audience, it was a whole difference of be lecturing to a black audience. And then in fact that in the black community, we seem to be more intuitive from your observations. Is that what you were saying?
oh
And
yeah,
essentially you said the black men were more intuitive than the sisters. Is that true? And what makes
yes,
you say that?
yeah. Lord. In the '40s, the white psychiatrist, um, and it might have been like the Rhine Institute. There are a couple of famous psychic. The University of Virginia, where Grayson's from, that's a psychic research college institute. So, and it can, and you could Google it, but they tested the whites and the black for psychic capacity, aptitude, and ability. And the blacks were the number ones. The black male was the first, the black female was the second, then white man, white woman, and then I don't even know if they checked the other groups. But between the whites and the blacks, those were the two.
Hmm.
And they always study us. You know, they study our skin, they study our hair, our reflexes, and we're different from them too. Uh, just like I think some of your guests might have said, we with the DNA strands, we have 9 DNA strands to their 6, and there's another
Hold up.
group that
They only have 6 DNA strands and we have 9 DNA
have
strands?
9. Yeah, that accounts for all the everything we get into, whether it be golf, piano, or basketball. We excel, even in intellectual things like science, literature, music, anything. And it's our melanin that really helps us.
In
And
fact, they're talking now about the melanin of our skin has a very influence on computers and does even better than some of the crystals, the
I
melanin.
believe, I believe our eyesight is better, our reflex is better. When my son was younger, like maybe a couple of months old, he had an Irish doctor, and she told us that the black kids, because he was crawling and talking at like 8 weeks, and so we asked her about that. She said the black babies develop faster than the white ones, you know, and they have like a jump. That jump is later stunted when they, by age 7, when they either through faulty parents or the outside influences of the world that repress them down. This for all kids, but especially the black kids. But they develop faster between the ages of mentally and physically between the ages of 1 and 7, and then the system kind of regulates them or tries to.
You know, there's an interesting thing. There was a piece where this psychiatrist says, "You show me a child at age 7, and I'll show you the kind of adult they're going to become." So this is
Exactly.
why I think it's very, very important that we really, really begin to focus on the raising of our children in ways that bring out the best of them. So by age 7, there is no way that we can be stopped from our greatness. None.
Yeah. Yes.
You know,
Yes.
that's very, very interesting. So let me ask you this. Now, let me go back. This gentleman that was at the University of the Temple at Temple University, where you were literally next door, was he the one that sparked your interest in UFOs?
No, I had an interest in them because at 19 I had been abducted. Um,
Excuse me?
at 19 I was abducted. I saw a
Get
UFO.
out of here. Really? Can you
Yes.
share that with us?
Hmm. I was with a friend, a white friend, Roger, and we were driving down a street in this like what would be a college town. We're driving down the street, and we stopped. We were driving down the street, and he was driving, and there was a red light up ahead. And before we got to the red light, I looked at him, and behind him, out the window, I could see like a saucer, a big saucer-like craft floating about a block or two away. I said, "Roger, look," and he looked, and I got out the window so I could see above the hood of the car, and sat on the window. You know, I opened the window and stuck my head out and looked at it. And when we looked at it, time seemed to slow down, and we could see the headlights because it was about 7:45, not yet dark, but not fully light in the summer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We could see the cars on either side of us and the headlights, but there was no movement. And while we stared at this thing, um, time seemed to freeze. And then the next thing we knew, it shot up in the air and curved off into the sky. And I had had some strong after effects after that too. Um,
Such as?
well, um, I was always looking up at the skies, and those type of things, especially back then as a teenager. A lot of times, young people are the most psychic. That's like the teenage years are the most psychic years because they have their hormones, they're growing, they're still kids, and so a lot of times they'll have these experiences and then just shirk them off. Oh well, that was wild, or that didn't happen, and then you go on about your way. Um, and what was the question, Lloyd? I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying that, like, for the most part, did you, in other words, with this abduction, and you said you had kind of lost time. Time had kind of like you were like in suspended time and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, the after effects. Yeah, there was just a sense of in the season or two after that UFO, a sense of someone watching you, of dread or fear that you couldn't see but you could feel. At one time, I walked out in the front of my lawn about 7 in the summer, and I felt something on top of me. And when I looked up like that, there was this huge triangle craft, like close, right near the street lights, that close, where it was. I couldn't even see like beyond the edge. And then I don't remember what happened with that craft, but it was right above me. I might have just went back in. But kids aren't as cemented as adults, and so they kind of push that to the back of the memories of their mind. But when I was 14, my dad, I was cutting the lawn in the back, and he saw these scars on my legs. I had on short pants, right at my thighs where they meet the hips. He
Hmm.
says, Eugene, Eugene, what are these scars? I said, I don't know. They've always been there. And they were, I later showed them to Dr. J, and they were abduction scars. And they're long, they're huge. And if you stretch them, they'll stretch like a rubber band and then stretch right back into place. They have like staples that stretch too. Maybe I can send you a picture. But I had been also during the teen years having dreams about being paralyzed by the aliens and fighting the aliens. And paralyzation happens when it happens during out of bodies, during rigor mortis at the moment of death, you're paralyzed, and they also happen during out of alien abductions. So that was one of many uh, connections that I saw in this near death research. So that's why I went to Dr. Jacobs.
Here's my question: did by any chance, when you share this with people, did they kind of look at you cross-eyed or like, "Yeah, Gene, right, Gene"? You know how people do, doubting Thomases. Did you have that? And see, because sometimes that discourages us, especially when you're young in the teenage years, because sometimes we look to our adults as guides for encouragement, discouragement, whatever the case may be.
Yes, still in the 80s. And I really never did like that decade. It was just too much greed and people all about themselves. But in the 80s, you still really couldn't talk about it. You could talk about near deaths, like 83, 85, 87, but it was still kind of that's a weird thing, or you must be dreaming, or, they don't really, they're seeing illusions. Um, but you definitely couldn't talk about UFOs in the 80s. In the 90s, the, it's socially acceptable to talk about UFO abductions.
Yeah, now it's very popular to talk about UFOs and stuff like that. But other than that, other than I think the Air Force had Project Blue something, Blue Book or whatever the name was referred to,
Hmm.
that the subject of UFOs was definitely kept under wraps.
Yeah,
Period.
yeah, yeah.
Even
And
though airmen had seen it, air pilots, everything.
yeah, because people were still living fast, and it would get even faster in the 90s. And the people were about other things, partying and getting girls and running around. And, because the 90s was kind of wild too. Um, but so that's why I contacted Dr. Jacob to see if he saw what I saw. And he said yes, 100%, that there was UFO activity in my near death. And I had thought there was too.
Hmm. Hmm.
So he was confirming what I had was suspicious of.
Now, here's another thing. Believe it or not, this interesting couple that we have here, she actually wrote to you. You actually knew her. This is Betty and Barney Hill. They are the first couple that the government has officially confirmed that there was possibly a UFO abduction. I think you knew her and your father knew Barney. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, Lloyd. Yeah, Dad and Barney were both Philadelphia friends, and they both worked at the post office together. They were also in the
Yeah,
war.
he was a postal worker. Exactly. And his
Yeah,
wife was a social worker, Betty.
yes. So Dad and Mom knew Barney before he met Betty, and then they met Betty in the 50s. And then we would meet both of them in the 60s. And we would go up to their house like at least once every summer and every winter, stay the weekend, hear the story, talk with them and stuff, play with their dog right there, and then go back home thinking about the UFOs and stuff. So, I guess they were the first famous people I met. They
Well,
were
they were
both,
the first famous ones. I know this that was by where it was generally accepted by the US government that they
mm-hmm,
officially, although they still like to use the words allege, okay, but they have all the evidence. And in fact, what happens is it was that abduction took place for 2 hours on September the 19th and 20th of 1961. And at
mm-hmm,
that time, interracial couples was like almost unheard of, but they were out of New Hampshire. And from
yes,
what I understand, they had just went out. They went on vacation to Niagara Falls, then Montreal, Canada for a belated honeymoon. And then along Route 3, when they were coming back about 10:30 at night, they saw, and it's so interesting. So they saw the lights. They described it just as you saw with your friend, that they
okay,
were driving along and then there were lights in the back, and that Betty had actually told her husband Barney to stop to kind of see what was going on and all at the same time walk the dog. And the next thing they know, there was a time lapse of 2 hours. And in fact, this was in 1961, but the U.S. Air Force and the powers that be that in UFOs didn't really start getting into them until late '63 into 1964. And in fact, it was this doctor here, Dr. Benjamin Simon, who actually saw them and actually put them under hypnosis, which is here. And
mm,
they went through a hypnosis process from June of 1964, January of 1964, all the way through June of 1964. And from what I
yeah,
understand, the doctor, he has them both hypnotized there, but he also then separated them and found out that even in separations, there was similar stories about them being abducted on this ship. Okay.
yes,
And in fact, because of it, it led to this book here called The Interrupted Journey that led to the movie. and in fact, this was a publication of the movie. There, it looks like it's from the National Enquirer, though, just before the movie came out, uh, documenting their experiences. And in fact, the person that played Barney was none other than James Earl Jones.
Yes.
Okay, and and that it was Estelle Parson that played Betty's role.
Yes.
Okay, so I
They were
just
good.
think it's interesting. You said the movie was good?
It was very good, riveting. Yeah, it's on YouTube for free.
Interesting, interesting, interesting. And in fact, this was the rendering of Betty and Barney's rendering of that experience of the ship that they tried to describe it. And that, unfortunately, Barney died at a very young age of cerebral hemorrhage at 46.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? But Betty died of cancer decades later. Um, and in fact, this is the site that this was the site of, well, I should say the milestone or marker where they were abducted in that New Hampshire road along Route 3 in
Yes.
September 20th of 1961. And this is their gravesite right here. They were both
Uh,
born in June. Um, Barney was more of a Gemini Cancer. She was definitely a Cancer. And as you see, he passed away just at 46, and she lived to be about her late 80s or so. So I just think this is interesting, but I'll tell you this. If you notice on the gravesite, what it says is in the interrupted journey, which came from the gentleman Jonathan Griff, or whatever the author's name is, that actually this marked this term, the interrupted journey, was taken from the book that was actually written about these two, because once he got into it, he then consulted the the um, the psychiatrist, Dr. Benjamin Simon. He contacted Betty and Barney Hill, and then he went on to write the book that then became on to be a famous movie. And in fact, that book, um, Interrupted Journey, is now being, believe it or not, released. Is being re-released. It's going to be out in May
oh,
of 2020, or
okay.
2022 rather. But the book,
Okay.
if you order it, you won't be able to get it until May. But that was what led to it. But then after that, it was Betty's relative that actually had the book published by both him and her, or her and him, however you want to put it, where they put their own first personal experience about that journey. So I just think it's interesting. So because of your sort of out of body experiences, and that, by the way, the gentleman that was in the car with you on that evening, what was his experience? Did he ever say anything?
He doesn't remember anything.
Really?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yes. No, I saw one with my son, and he remembers it, but he saw something different than I did, um, and he didn't want to. When I asked him about what happened, he didn't really want to recall it, but he was able to. Um, and then there's the age thing too, and sometimes a UFO can appear to a group of people, and half can see it and half won't. So, although we're both, he's my blood son, but then it helps if the person wants to know about it, because you can block yourself off from stuff. Like he used to have dreams of the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, fighting Batman in the apartment when he was 5 or 6. I told him, just tell yourself that you want your dreams to stop. And he said he did, and it stopped. And so, and we have we actually have three minds, but the subconscious mind is the one that we should really work with, because
Mhm,
it's like our own personal genie. And
mhm.
once we get in contact with that inner self, our inner self, through meditation, and then dreams, and then out of bodies, you will begin to communicate regularly with your higher self, and your higher self can do things that we cannot do, and know and go do things for you while you sleep that we could never do. And
You
it's
know,
willing. Yes.
no, I tell you, I've got so much, and then I got into your book because there was a part about You know how some people say they can't remember the dreams? Well, you have a section on in your book on dreams, how to remember them, how to enhance it for those that can. Because I've had one of my guests on that actually develop a dream journal where
Okay.
when a person gets up, they can fill out the blanks and stuff to help guide them. Why is it that some people can remember dreams and some people can't? And then for those that can and wish to, because there was an interesting thing you said that when they dream and get up, don't open your eyes because that opens up the third eye. You keep your. Can you explain all of that, please? I'll let it come from the horse's mouth.
Yeah. Yeah. The main reason why most people can remember or can't is because first you have to want to remember them. If you go to bed and not even thinking about anything, you just go to sleep after watching a movie, then you may or may not have a dream. But if you go to bed saying, I want to have a dream and I want to remember the dream, and there are also other little things you can do too, then you're way more likely to have a dream. Like if you, that desire is important. So the best way to remember the dream and what the non-dreamers don't do is that, just like you said, uh, when you have the dream, when you wake up from the dream, you want to open your eyes just to make sure you know where you are and everything's safe, and then close your eyes back again and stay in the same position. And the dream will still be there, especially if you open your eyes, you know that you're in the room, then you go back into sleep, just like a snooze alarm. And the dream
Mm-hmm.
is still there. So you remember the last thing that you can of the dream, and then you go to the thing before that and the thing before that. And you can, and a lot of times you can remember the whole dream just by going in reverse. But when you wake up, try not to even open your eyes. Just try and lay still while listening to make sure the room's all right. And then uh, remember the last image and go back to the scene before that, and the scene before that, and the scene before that. And if the person does regular nightly deep breathing meditations, that will expand the consciousness when awake in real life and then when awake in your dreams. And you'll remember a lot more if you do the deep breathing exercises. Because after a while, you get so used to doing the deep breathing exercises that you'll begin to deep breathe in your sleep.
Mm-hmm.
In
Mm-hmm.
fact, if you're ever in a sleep and you begin to wake up and you know you're waking up, if you take a deep breath, it'll cement you more into the dream. I've
Interesting.
had dream.
Interesting.
Yes, yes. So the air has a lot to do with our level of consciousness, and the person wants to use that air to have continuity of consciousness, so you can remember every. Uh, so there is no interrupted stream of memory. You have every sequential event that happened in your dreams. You'll be able to remember it just from that extra expansion of air. And then if you write it down, you go back to sleep. You don't go back to sleep, but after you wake up, you close your eyes. Try to remember in reverse detail what happened and then what happened before that, and then get up and write it down. And as
That's
soon
where
as you,
dream journal comes in.
yeah, and keep it right next to your bed, because a lot of times it's good to go back and remember those dreams. Like you'll see a dream from a year ago and you'll say, wow. Um, a lot of times there are important things in dreams that don't show up to a couple of weeks later. And then you'll get used to, and you'll have more dreams, and you'll have more vivid dreams. And once you get used to the dreams, there are techniques that you can use in the dream to turn the dream into a conscious out of body, where you're awake in real life but invisible.
This is explained in your book.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's chapter
definitely.
3.
Now I want to say this. I've had on more than several occasions, I would get out of a train or a bus or something, and I remember the dream. I remember it as if, in fact, I go into shock. What is that whereby you think you forget something, but then there's an actual occurrence? And I mean, I'm so busy in shock. I'm trying to say, well, what happened next in the dream? I'm just like, wow, I remember dreaming of this. What is that about, Eugene?
When you suddenly remember a dream,
Not just suddenly remember it, but remember actually dreaming it before the event occurred.
oh, okay, like a pre-dream.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, one time I was somewhere, I got off a bus or whatever the case is, and in that instance, I remember dreaming it. That was in my dream.
Okay, that's
What
like a
is that
future.
about?
That sounds like a future dream.
A future
And
dream. Okay,
yeah,
well, I've had a couple of those.
uh-huh. Was that an important day or anything, or did it just pop out? You
It
recognize
just
this?
it just popped out of the blue. I mean, I'm just minding my business, and I'm saying, "Wow, something happened." But in that instance, I could remember that. Whoa, I dreamed about that.
Yes, yes, yes. I've had that too, and that is interesting. That shows that the mind is in good shape and in good health, where you recognize something that is from the other side. And when we in this world, when we're awake, we should always look for messages from the invisible world. And in the dream or invisible world, we should always look for messages from the real world. And then you begin to live in two worlds at the same time. And
Interesting.
yeah, we have a dual nature and a dual consciousness. And we have the physical side of us, and then we have the spiritual side. And we're actually physio spiritual beings. We're partially spiritual and partially physical. In this world, in this country, they mainly use the physical. But for us, it's natural to also use the spiritual. And you can get in contact with that other side by the breathing meditations, the working on the dreams, which will produce out of bodies. If you do the breathing exercises regularly, and they're good for health too, and you work on your dreams, and the breathings will promote the dreams, and then the dreams and the breathings will promote spontaneous or out of bodies.
Now, I believe you talked about dreaming also in this book, right?
Yes, I think that's chapter 2.
Yeah. Listen, I have
Okay.
one body at the bottom of your screen. This person had a drowning out of body experience at 16, comes somewhat like you as a teenager. Was weird being above her or their dead body in a coma. Isn't that
Yes.
interesting?
Yes. Yeah.
What would you
And
have to say to this person?
when we get into those stages where you have a drowning, death, or a near death, or an out of body, then we're using that other mind more, that spiritual, higher, subconscious mind, which would be the real us, and the lower us or the awake us is in abeyance and it's shut down. And whenever you have a psychic or dream or mystical experience, your spiritual self takes over. Like the subconscious is the conscious mind of the person's spirit body. And your spirit body has a mind too, and that's our subconscious. And when you tell your subconscious to do something, that spirit body and its mind goes out while you're asleep and have forgotten about it and tries to move heaven and earth to do what you say. And that thing, Aladdin and the genie, that genie that's in that bottle is our mind. And we in our subconscious, which is our higher spiritual self, a genie that's willing to go out and move heaven and earth in a spiritual way to get whatever we say and regularly think and say that we want. And once we learn that and begin to practice and absorb that, you can change your world and change the world. If
That's why
that's
they need to get your book. And I'm going to show that in a moment. Now, this person says that their friends, my friends and I ran to the lights. We wanted to go, but it took off like a speed of light.
were they talking? Is this a dream thing? Would you think?
I don't think so. I just think they ran to the light. It doesn't say in a dream or anything like that. Just that they ran to the light. So I'm assuming it's like what you experienced driving with your friend and you saw the lights, like Betty and Barney Hill driving late at night, coming back from their honeymoon, seeing these lights, but they ran to the lights, not away from the lights, but they ran to the lights and then took off. But there is now common acknowledgement that there are other things on this planet other than just some airplanes up in the air because
Yes.
too many airline pilots, jet pilots, fighter pilots have been seeing other forces. So now it's almost like common, where before it's like, shh, you
Yes.
know?
Yes. Yeah, and they've been letting bits and bits of pieces of information. Like recently, they said that there are unidentified flying objects. The Air Force released something saying that they know way more. Like I draw too, and one day I was at this artist gallery, and this Spanish lady who was, I guess, running the gallery used to work for the CIA, and she said, I asked her, how far ahead is the government in knowledge of UFOs than the regular people? She said about 75 years. So they know stuff
What?
about that. And I believed her. That sounds about right.
And what was the
So
question you asked her again, so people are clear about the question you asked her?
I asked her, as far as UFO knowledge about them, how far ahead of is the government than the normal citizen? How much more do they know than we do about UFOs? She said about 75 years worth. They're about 75 years ahead of what we know.
Now, there's another question. The person says, can one have a lapse of consciousness during sleep or dream state? Which I think is a
Yeah,
great question.
yes,
How would you
yes. Well,
explain that to this person? By can they have a lapse? What do they mean by that? Can they have a lapse? In other words, do they forget or they don't
well,
remember?
yeah. I mean, but like when during sleep, that is, I mean, just the process of sleep is actually a lapse of consciousness because you're no longer conscious of this real physical world, but you're conscious in another invisible, ethereal dream world. And so there's a lapse when you switch from this world during sleep and then going into the sleep world, but you're awake there too. So that there's a,
Interesting.
but those breathing exercises will help you continue your continuity of the consciousness will continue so that you can literally walk from sleep or go from sleep to dream while still partially awake. And even though the person is half asleep and half awake, they're those breathings can keep you awake enough and in the sleep state enough so that you can literally enter the dream. Sometimes you won't even know you're in the dream until you recognize something. But there are a lot of dream exercises that can promote that. And that was a good question. Yeah.
And let me ask you this. People will say, well, listen, I'm breathing anyway, Gene. What are you talking about? Obviously, there must be a special technique in dreaming, alternate nose breathing or deep breathing or meditative breathing. But this person asks an interesting question. It says, Eugene, have you ever met Danian Brinkley?
I never met him, but I heard about him.
Who
He
is this person supposed to be that this person, Debbie, has mentioned?
he's a guy who had let me see here last. He's a guy who had a couple of near death. Once where he was struck by lightning,
Ah,
and it changed his personality. Where he went from being a bully to being some peace loving big guy. And he's around. He's made a lot of appearances on shows and stuff like that. So, but the researchers don't really, at least with Atwater and Gracie, they don't really, you know, they see him more maybe as an author than a researcher. He's definitely an experiencer, but they don't they don't really regard him like that. Yeah.
now again, when you use the term experiencer, you mean one who's actually experienced these out of body dreams or whatever the case is. Like they'll
Yes.
say influencer. Most people know that word, like, to try to persuade you to do something. But an experience is something different. And you also mentioned in the book there was a controller.
Yes.
What was your reference to that, Eugene? I
That-
mean, I got so many things. I'm going to let you go after a
I
while, but
I love the
the book was
questions.
so engaging. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a good one. I noticed this controller. I noticed this controller figure during the near death, and I also noticed it during dreams and out of body. In wherever you are in the paranormal, psychic, or spiritual world, there is a supreme controller. The scientists call this controller the controller, but I called it the controlling agent in charge. And this controller has the ability to roam the paranormal mansions and rooms at will, and inflicting or not inflicting his will on it. Um, the scientists were concerned about this controller because to them and to anyone, it represents a God force or the opposite of a God force. And that was why they withheld the information about the controller to the public. I said, I'm going to tell the public because that explains a lot to us. So I wrote this about the controller because and it's in the book, because he
Yes.
controls our life. Yeah, it's in the book, Lloyd. And because he controls our life and death, it is the controller. Because it cannot be easily seen, he is the agent. It is he, God, the controlling agent in charge. Like a spiritual hunter, did I look for God's spiritual tracks throughout my NDE, completely sensing but never seeing him until stage 12, the final stage before resurrection. In time, the controller's footprints began to appear before my physical vision and spiritual vision, during and years after the near death. Stalking God's spiritual tracks involved analyzing a prevailing truth beyond the illusionary veils in several of the near death stages, but confirming the essence identity of God could only be attained by melding back into my near death, and then merging with God's present essence as well. And confirmation was established.
No, well,
So, yeah,
you explain that in your book about the controller too. That's very. This is
yeah.
an amazing book. I was so glued to this book. That's why I got tons of questions. But here's a person that said that they had an out of body experience that they clearly remembered, somewhat like you, but it scared them so because they couldn't control it, and they asked God to take it away from them.
Okay.
And that's at the
Well,
bottom of your screen.
yes. Yeah. I mean, that's natural because when I was a teenager and having these out of body experiences, I was freaked out and afraid too. Like, suppose you're sleeping and then you wake up suddenly and find yourself 4 feet off the bed. And then without turning your head, just wanting to see where you are, there's a thing called 360-degree spherical consciousness where
Hmm.
when you're in that spiritual realm or mode, you can see all around you without turning your head. You can see in a 360-degree vision without even, so all you got to do is think about it. Like, think where my mom is, and you look to the left and you see her, what she's doing. So if a person suddenly found themselves, and if you do the breathings, if a person does 100 breathings, um, after a while, so you can do the breathings where you can literally watch yourself come out of your body. You'll watch your,
Wow, that's
yeah,
deep.
yes.
That's
Some
deep,
people hear like
Eugene.
a,
Okay.
yeah, some people hear like a machine like cranking as they're going up, and some just pop 4 feet above their body. But if you do the breathing steadily, and you'll continue to do them while you're breathing, um, you'll see yourself paralyzed up. It'll start from the feet up. Once you're fully paralyzed, you might feel a shaking movement um, or vibrations. You might hear things, but remain fully calm. And that's why controlling the emotions is important in real life, but especially in spiritual things, so you can see the reality of what's happening.
Got
Because
it. Got it.
some of these things are so unique and new that a person will freak out if they see themselves coming or feel themselves coming up out their body. But the breathings help you to control that. As just like when they tell someone, calm down, take 10 breaths. The breathings help you to regulate your emotions and your feelings. And you can, during the breathings, while you're going to sleep, you do them deep enough and steady enough. And do this for about a month. You'll begin to, after you get past the paralyzations, um, when you're fully paralyzed, continue breathing. And you're so paralyzed that you can only breathe through your stomach. But continue breathing, and you'll feel yourself separate. Um, there's a few different ways to separate, but usually it's on the back, and you'll float up, and you'll have a dual consciousness. Like, you'll be able to feel yourself and see yourself floating up, while at the same time being in your body, watching yourself float up.
All of
So
this is explained in your book. Am I correct?
yes, yes.
Yeah, you got to get it. And by the way, this same young lady says, what should she had said to make her comfortable with that out of body experience that kind of like scared her? In other
She
words,
could
she's
ask,
probably saying what should she have said or done. What's your response to her question in that regard?
yeah. Since the out of body is very closely associated, and in fact, the paralyzations is an indicator that you're about to have an out of body. And most people fight the paralyzations. The most powerful thing you can do when those kind of things start happening, and you don't want to deal with it psychologically, because these are psychological effects that are happening inside your mind, inside your psyche, but they're happening
Hmm.
in spiritual reality too. All you have to do before you go to sleep is ask God to fully protect you. And there have been people who have been paralyzed and couldn't get out. In fact, it's sometimes the stronger you tie, the tighter it gets. Because the real thing about sleep, when we go to sleep, we don't get the energy from knocking out and going to sleep. Our spirit body comes out of our physical body and recharges in the electromagnetic energy that's in the air. The Indians call it prana, and the Chinese call it chi, but there's an
That makes
electro.
sense. That makes sense.
And so we recharge. And when a person's sick, their body recharges even more. It jumps out farther into that etheric cosmic energy. Just like when you have one out of body, you'll begin to have psychic powers. Because once you get outside of your body, whether you are consciously awake or not, you absorb that electromagnetic energy that is our life force. And the after effects are psychic abilities. And the abilities will begin to blossom in your dream life, and then the dreams will lead to out of bodies, and then once you start having out of bodies, the psychic abilities will begin to blossom in real life. So you'll begin to have psychic abilities in real life and in your spiritual higher dream life.
I
And
tell you, I've kept you way over time, but I gotta.
I could stay. I could
Yeah,
stay.
listen. This person said they had a continuous dream that it felt they were leaving their body, and then their body was floating atop a lake, being sunny out.
Yes, yes. Now see, a lot of times dreams are so similar to out of bodies that when we're having an out of body, we think that we're dreaming. Like I used to have a falling dream every night. And then I had it so many nights, like 60 nights in a row, that I said, this is that falling dream. So I know I'm not going to get hurt. I'll just wake up. And when I let myself go, I stopped falling and I started floating. I said, well, maybe I can fly. When I said fly, I took off. And I was so excited that I woke up and popped back into my body. But I had to continue. See, it sounds like this person woke up consciously in out of body form, thought it was a dream when they were really awake in real life somewhere, but invisible. That out of body thing is interesting too. There's been prisoners who learned to do out of bodies and were able in spirit form to leave the prison, go to a bank, find out the code, go visit their girlfriends, or watch them. But and then
I
when you have
don't
that,
doubt that. I don't doubt that that humans have amazing powers that we've yet to tap into, that would probably startle people if they really knew how powerful we as human beings are.
yes,
You
and they
know,
know that they also the Journal of Sleep Studies. They know they haven't told us, but the blacks have more of a propensity for out of body experiences than any of the other groups.
can you repeat that one more time so we have some clarity up in here?
Yeah, if you look up, and I'll try and find the exact link, but if you look up the Journal of Sleep Studies, there was a small paragraph where they noted that the blacks have more of a natural propensity for out of body experiences than all of the other groups. When it comes to the psychic stuff, we are the number one, and they know it's mainly because of the melanin. And when the whites see us, they say that, damn, these people really believe in God. They're not pretending. They really believe in God. And that's because we know there is a real God. And sometimes the other groups look at us and they know that there's something that we have that they don't. And some of them surmise that it maybe that there is a God. They know we believe in it. But the other groups, especially the whites, they're not, a lot of them aren't sure. A lot are, but there's a lot of them who definitely don't believe in God. And you've got to have that God power. And we have it. Also with the blacks in the UFOs, the aliens were investigating Barney's bone structure, and they noticed that the blacks have a bone structure that they would like to have in their DNA. And they were very interested in that. That was something that Betty didn't tell the public, or maybe even the doctors. But I did a documentary with her, an interview with her, 3-hour one, and she mentioned that in there. So they like the blacks for their
Hold up,
bone
are
structure.
you serious? You did an interview with
Yeah,
Betty
yes,
Hill? Really?
Betty Hill, in 1999.
Is
Because I
there
knew,
is there a way that people can see this documentary or interview?
yeah, I'll be bringing it out soon, probably this summer. Yeah, it's in copyrights.
Yeah, listen. Listen. I done kept you way past the
I
mark,
could
okay?
stay. I can. I
But
have to.
but this is so fascinating to me because this person said they were in an induced coma. It's at the bottom of your screen, and nothing. They said nothing but the color purple on a bus with a few people humming. I mean, that's
Yes.
not that you're trying to interpret it, but it's
The
it, well, what
yeah, those are
what do you
near,
pick up from that?
well, it's definitely a near death. A coma is like the number two or number three. Like drownings are first, then heart attacks, then strokes and comas. Um,
Really?
yes, most people have drowning, 60%, and then either comas or heart attacks after that. Yeah, those are the top three. But there's also car crashes and shootings and stuff like that.
Sure, sure, sure.
But see, in this one, in those realms, there's a lot of illusions, and the illusions are mixed with reality until they become one singular reality. And with continuous meditation and a regular lifelong habit of it, and highly focused concentration during meditation produces a merging into things where one becomes one with one's object of focus. Um, in this one, it seemed like she might have been it might have been a semi-spiritual illusion, what her conscious mind thought she saw, or she didn't see the full reality of what was really happening. Something was happening, but uh, uh, but colors are important too. And at the bus stop, that might mean something exactly to her, but you know, it there's not a lot to and see that there's a lot of memory issues, and that's why those breathings, because they build up the memory capacity and that continuity of consciousness where you remember everything, because there's a lot to remember, and there's a lot that happens in those realms.
Wow. This is really amazing. In all fairness, let me say this. Let me put on the screen here Eugene Braxton and how you can get in touch with him. There it is at the bottom of the screen, so everybody can take note. Uh, he is really a near-death researcher, UFO researcher, author, lecturer. Um, that's his website right there, Eugene Braxton at Wix.com. For his PayPal now. You know how I feel about the PayPal. Got to help a brother out. Got to help everybody who's on my show out. So his is in his website, Eugene Braxton at Wix.com. So please go there and go to his PayPal section. Is that correct, sir? By the way, can people get your book too there?
Yes, you can get it right at the website. And if you put in Eugene Braxton, you'll see Wix.com on the Google too.
Good.
Yeah.
And hold up, I gotta do something else too, because we're not quite finished here. And this is his book, by the way. Okay. I want everybody to it is available at his site. It is also available on Amazon. You gotta have his book. I mean, this is the most amazing. Hold on, let me take this banner off so people can see the entire book here. This is the most amazing thing from this gentleman who is a Capricorn 6. Almost everything happens with a 6 with him. We were talking before. It's just amazing how these numbers work. And 6 is the psychic number. When
Okay.
it says read a person like a sixth sense, that's what
Okay.
So um, that's very interesting. So hold on, let me get this image out the way of the book. Please pick up his book. His book is available. Go to his website to get it. Go to Amazon and get it, but you must have it to read it. I mean, there's so much clarity, and especially the section on people who say, "Oh, I can't dream. I don't remember dreams." Well, reading the section on his dreams will clarify the proper procedure of how to not only remember your dreams, but enhance your dreams and then
Hmm.
expand your dreams, which I think is the most clearest explanation I've ever read on the
Yes.
subject of dreams.
Yes. In fact, because you guys were talking about it too, crystals are a big help. Like if a person can't remember the dreams, no matter what they do, get some crystals, one or two, put them under your pillow, and some sterling silver on as a ring or a bracelet, and they'll come in super clear. That will help the continuity. You do those in the breathings, you'll remember all your dreams. There's a lot of information that can be obtained in dreams.
Well, let me see something. I'm gonna maybe take one or two more responses, and then I'll give you a break. But you will be back. We definitely got to have a part two, and
I think
definitely, huh?
we've only covered 1/10 of the stuff we could talk about, like hypnotizing people, how to use the eyes, like to see its spiritual vision, and in real life. There's a lot of things. The three minds of man, the levels of consciousness. There's a lot of things that we could talk about. Yeah, remote viewing, all kinds of things.
Yeah, you are an extraordinary human being. That's all I'm going to tell you, Eugene. That's that's my opinion, and I've been around the block a bit. Okay,
Yes, I
many meet too
admire
many
you.
people like you. So, but I'm so glad that it was Dr. Adwater, Patrice Adwater, that encouraged you to write this book. And
Yes,
for those of you, I mean, I kept the book with me when I travel. I take the book with me. It's an easy read, but it's so in depth. It is so in depth about those things that deal in what is called otherworldly experiences, for lack of a
yes,
better way of putting it.
yes,
All righty. So definitely, please, please, let me put up his banner again. There it is, right there at the bottom of your screen. Go to his website, uh, and he is obvious. That I think that's amazing that you would know Betty, who was abducted in 1961. That your father taught the guy who was the principal of the movie that Morgan Freeman played as the principal, because that was a powerful movie right there. But I didn't
yeah,
know that the movie of, I think it was called, I forgot what they call the name of this movie that they spun off from um, Betty and Barney Hill, where James Earl Jones portrayed it in '75 with Estelle Parsons. And you
yes.
said that movie, for those that want to kind of see that, is now free on where? YouTube?
It's free on YouTube. Yes,
Okay,
it's free on
good.
YouTube.
Okay,
Um,
good.
and if you put in James Earl Jones, Estelle Parsons, it'll come up too. But
Yeah.
I think it's called The Interrupted Journey in on YouTube too.
No, it was The Interrupted Journey because it was based on the best-selling book at that time. Now that book is actually coming back out again. It's going to be released in May. You know what
Yes,
I'm saying? So
yes.
something is going on, and I think nothing could have happened at a better time than this. Eugene, thank you, man. I'm oh, by the way, hold on one second. I got this little ritual I gotta do, is just let people know what's gonna be happening. And listen, for everybody, I gotta thank you. Thank you for your patience. Um, everybody, all of my guests are very special as far as I'm concerned. My guest, and speaking of special guests, my guest is coming Wednesday is, oh, there she is. That's my daughter. That's the one who kind of changed my life in terms of diet. And she's going to be talking about diet and nutrition and foods and everything like that, how to eat to live. Because when my daughter came to live with me, which I ain't going to give the whole story about, her living with me actually changed. Boy, if y'all saw what I was eating. Anyway, thank you, darling. That's all I can say. She changed the whole equation of my life in terms of dieting and how I eat. And this is her book called Eat, by the way. That's also available. And she's gonna be talking Wednesday with us. And by the way, my numerology course is still on sale. Today is the last day. And by the way, if you go to my website, Lloyd-Strayhorn, sign up for the free monthly newsletter that my associate, my partner, Kaya French, and I've done. You go to lloyd-strayhorn.com, but go to lloyd-strayhorn.com to sign up for this course and get it at a discount. As you see, just the combined course when it's not on sale is almost $200. But here you can get it for the price of lunch for two. All righty. So, and then you get a certification when you complete the course. So please sign up. Today is the last day. I know some of my brothers and sisters like to wait till the last minute. So for those in that bunch, rush to do this before 12 midnight, unless you live on the West Coast. Then you got to 3 a.m. in the morning. And that is it for now. Hold on, let me get to my buddy. Let me see this. Okay, here we go. Let me get this off, Gene and Eugene. I'm talking like we buddies, but in a sense we are. In a sense we are.
Yeah, we are.
Um, Gene, I
And
want
Lloyd,
to thank you so much, my friend.
can I just say this
Yes,
one
go right
last thing?
ahead.
Okay.
Yes, please do.
There is, oh, thanks, Lloyd. Yeah, there is life after death. There is a resurrection, and there is a real God. But also, there are aliens are a reality too. And as the near death brings primal ecstasy, the UFO abduction often brings primal fear. But I guess we can talk about that next time. There's a lot
Yeah,
of
because
good
you know
info.
one of the questions. Yeah, because I got so many questions like about well, what happens when a person is at that final stage of death? Do they therefore go through that experience, or they, because none of us leave this planet alive. There's no question
No,
about that. I don't know one person that's still around from the 1800s, 1600s, or thousands of years ago. So I'm figuring there's got to be something because all of us got to go to the other side. Would I be right, Eugene?
yes, yeah, we all will. It's naturally just like a leaf falls up from a tree, we will rise upward and then ascend into the heavenly higher realms. And there's more to the invisible world than there is in the real world. Hmm.
So, in other
It's
words, we should not be afraid of the ultimate death, as they call it,
no, no, there is
and
no
that there
real
are
death.
things beyond it.
No, you don't really
Well,
die. You literally, like PMH said, you literally just wake back up. And the more aware you are of the more aware you are spiritually, the more you can recognize and adjust to it when it happens. It's those kind of that knowledge of higher worlds is really important because it can help us here in this world too. And when with the asking for, like, you can, and we'll get into it next time, but you can ask God to, because people talk about manifesting this, manifesting that, but when you develop yourself up to a high enough range and you do away with the psychic abilities and you start asking God to manifest and manifest and manifest, after a while you've attained a certain level that you no longer want things, you only want Him. And you can have anything in this world. Um, but when you get to that level, there are few things left in this world that you want, especially if you're on that track of only God,
hmm
and because He's
hmm
away from this world. But there are still good things in this world to enjoy. But yes.
well, I
Hmm.
do have one final question. See, I've been trying to get off this thing to give you a break, but what happens? What about those people that are so caught up on the almighty dollar? And see, for me, when they say "In God We Trust," as far as I'm concerned, God on that denotes the good old dollar, because it's not the God that you and I are talking about, and they can't take it with them. So, what's like Warren Buffett? I think they says he makes about $137 million a day. Can we share some of that money, okay, Mr. Buffett? All righty. I mean, what is it about this obsession with money that none of them can take when they go home? Not a penny. I don't get it.
Yeah, that's actually a super good question because for us as blacks, and one black psychiatrist said it's actually blacks living in white insanity in a lot of different ways. I mean,
Can
we
you
live,
repeat what you just said, sir? I want to make sure I heard that right.
and a black psychiatrist. I used to study African psychology, and a black psychologist, a famous one, said that what the blacks are going through in this country now, in this time, in this world, is in this country is really blacks living in white insanity. This is our country, but it's not our world. And our world is a different world. I mean, we're cement cities. We can't touch the real actual earth. We have bad air to breathe. The stuff, the food that they give us is laced with all kinds of stuff, and you have to go literally go cook your own, go plant your own stuff just to get something of value. And it's cold and stuff up here. We're not. This is we have to get away from this system of things that we're in, and get to a higher, because this Caligula type world and lifestyle is not for those who are on a higher path. That's why it seems crazy for us. And they don't know. They're not in with God, and they don't want to be, because like you said, to them, money is God, and that's the only thing they need. Even though at the end they'll be fully tricked, and at the end, a lot of them desperately want to get in with God, because when they get closer, they know they're afraid of that ultimate reality. It will happen to them. They will be judged fairly, but to waste your life just getting things when there's so much more out there that we could have invisible higher things like a higher character, a higher nature, a higher intelligence. And like I said, you can get anything in this world that you want, but then when you get to that level um, of capacity, there's not too many things in this earth plane that you want, because you're focused and only you're really living in that other world mainly. So the person has to pick, but the higher invisible things are way more enduring and way more valuable. And
Makes a lot of sense to me, Eugene Braxton. We will have you back. I have almost took up 2 hours of your very valuable time,
I
but
could
I
stay
hope
there.
that the viewers, that's most important, that the viewers take something away from this. And for those that are not of color listening, don't take it personal. I mean, we all bring to the table, all species of our lives or ethnicities bring something to this table. But what I'm saying is, we have been so denied our specialness, not discouraged about our greatness and whatnot, that it is very good for us to hear this, understand it, and understand our power. And as of the last about year and a half, and they've probably been saying it before then, now there's this rediscovery that the melanin, the pigment that we have, actually generate these computers and phones better than the crystals that they get. So I just think that's very interesting. That's very enlightening, sir. That's all I can say. But
we are,
facts are facts. That's all I'm
yeah,
saying. Facts are facts.
we
Don't
are
take it personal.
we are way more than we think we are. 1,000 times, we have it within us to realize ambitions 1,000 times greater than those which we presently dream, and we shall fulfill
With that, brother, that's leaving on a
them.
very powerful and positive note. God bless you, Eugene Braxton. You take good care, and we will be talking with you soon. But let me tell you this, for all of my viewers, I want to thank you very, very much. This has been an extended show, couldn't answer everything, but this thing of death and whatnot has always intrigued many, many people. In astrology, it rules the eighth house, which is the sign of Scorpio, which is a house of death or rest from labor. But I think Eugene Braxton put it in a perspective that everybody can appreciate, because none of us leave this planet alive, but at least having an understanding of what the process is, I think is very reassuring. Thanks to Eugene. Eugene, bless you, man. Okay. And you take good care. And everybody, I'm going to end this broadcast, but listen, I look for you Wednesday. Okay. So stay tuned then.